Honorable Mr. Yudo Diwanda Priyadi, Chairman of the G20 Transition Working Group, Honorable Professor Tutuka Ariadji, Director General of Oil and Gas, Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, Republic of Indonesia, His Excellency Muhammad Hamil, Secretary General of the Gas Exporting Countries Forum. A very good morning to all of our respected guests here at the Grand Hyatt Bali, and also a warm welcome to everyone who is joining us virtually from around the world. Please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Lydia Ruddy, Special Advisor on U.S. ASEAN Affairs and Director of Communications at ERIA, the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia. It's an honor to be your MC today. Welcome to this G20 Transitional Energy Working Group parallel event on exploring short-term solutions to the global gas crisis, co-hosted by ERIA and the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources of the Republic of Indonesia. This workshop is held with the aim of finding short-term solutions to stabilize the global gas market so that the world can continue to recover together and strongly amidst the geopolitical crises. Without further ado, I would like to invite Mr. Yudo Dewananda Priyadi, Chair of the G20 Energy Transition Working Group, Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, Republic of Indonesia, to give welcoming remarks.
Speakers and participants, greeting to you all. Good morning from Bali, Indonesia. I am again Yudo Diwanda Priyadi as the Chair of Energy Transition Working Group, ETWG. It's pleased to welcome you all in the parallel event of the G20 ETWG. This workshop has a strong tagline, which is exploring short-term solution for global gas crisis. To the Economic Research Institute of ASEAN and East Asia area, I would like to convey our presidency's highest compliment for taking the strategic role as the co-organizer of this essential workshop. Thank you, area, for your consistent support to Energy Transition Working Group and in general to Indonesia. G20 Indonesian presidency chooses the main theme of recover together, recover stronger. The presidency has set three pillars, namely global health architecture, digital economic transformation, and sustainable energy transition. The pillar of sustainable energy transition is held under Energy Transition Working Group ETWG, addressing three priorities of accessibility, technology, and financing. G20 this year is held in a difficult time, marked by disruption to global energy market and energy prices hikes. The recent situation in the global energy markets and prices are becoming the issue which international communities should look after, while G20 members, as the largest energy producer and consumers, must consider maintaining the stability of energy prices. Hence, today, we would like to be part of finding the solution to the current situation through seminar on global energy market, particularly on gas crisis, which aims to explore short-term solution for global gas crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, so why gas market stability is important nowadays? First, gas enables the access to affordable and reliable clean energy sources, as well as for power generation. Countries today are facing the urgent needs for post-pandemic recovery, while adverse impact for climate change. In this significance, natural gas can be an energy source which is able to provide uninterruptible and flexible energy supply. It is also easy to store and has lower carbon emission. In terms of achieving clean energy transition, gas, of course, is an option for developing countries to shift from coal to gas. Second, gas also the key material for several industries, such as fertilizer, steel, and petrochemical. Third, gas is the key energy source to provide cleaner and more reliable energy for households, especially in developing countries, as there are around 760 million global population without adequate electricity access and 2.5 billion people without clean cooking access. Gas can be short-term solution to combat poverty, particularly in the near future. Fourth, gas is the bridging element in renewable energy sources development. Gas can be placed together with wind and solar energies which are facing intermittency, while energy storage technology have to be scaled up and innovative new energy pathways are widely expanded. Fifth, natural gas is also important to scale up the hydrogen development as one of the most promising clean energy technologies in the future. Hydrogen produced from gas can be complementary to hydrogen produced by renewables. Recognizing the importance of gas role, it is necessary to maintain global gas market stability. The instability of the gas market is likely to have negative impacts of the overall economy. The ongoing global gas uncertainty could also be disrupting our struggle to recover together, recover stronger, as the Indonesia presidency has sounded. Therefore, we gather today as G20 members and beyond to explore short-term solutions for current global gas crisis. Without further ado, I wish you all have a successful webinar. Thank you.
Thank you for your remarks, Mr. Priyadi. I now invite the Director General, Directorate General of Oil and Gas, Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, Indonesia, Professor Tutuka Aryaji, to give his opening remarks.
Mr. Yudo Dwinanda Priyadi, Chair of G20 Energy Transitions Working Group, Indonesia Presidency. His Excellency Engineer Muhammad Hamel, Secretary General of Gas Exporting Countries Forum. Professor Hidetoshi Nishimura, President of Area. Mr. Koichi Hachiyama, COO of Area. Panelists, moderators, participants, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning. It is a pleasure for me to take part in today's G20 Energy Transition Working Group parallel event series exploring short-term solutions for the global gas crisis. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, the recent conflict in Europe leads to an increase in energy prices. It has put pressures on economies of the G20 countries and beyond, which was before impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic and has just started to bounce back. In terms of natural gas, the current situation has led to a more tight gas market, in which there are supply disruptions, price volatility, and under-investment. Regarding the impact on gas markets, there is a significant increase of LNG spot price, such as in North Asia, Japan, Korean market, or JKM. LNG spot price increased to almost 60 USD per million BTU by August 16th, which is more than triple the level at this time year. Before early March, when European tension started, the level had been fluctuating between 20 USD and 40 USD per million BTU. European Gas Dutch Tidal Transfer Facility (TTF) price has also reached 240 USD per megawatt hour, or around 410 USD per barrel of crude oil equivalent, a more than 4 times increase compared to the same period last year. The LNG spot prices of the TTF show the same increase and volatility as the North Asia JKM LNG spot prices. As a gas producer and exporter country, Indonesia is not directly affected by the ongoing global gas market situation. However, we have consideration that the situation would be better, especially for countries affected directly by the increasing gas price and supply uncertainty. Nowadays, Indonesia is exporting LNG to several countries with a total export volume of almost 460 million MMBTU in year 2021. Regarding upstream LNG, China is the biggest importer of Indonesia LNG with a total volume of about 250 million MMBTU, followed by Republic of Korea, about 80 million MMBTU, and Japan by about 64 million MMBTU. While the downstream LNG, Indonesia exported about 111 million MMBTU in total, with Japan, Republic of Korea, and Chinese Taipei as the main destination. Ladies and gentlemen, in the national Indonesia gas balance year 2022-2030, Indonesia would meet all the demand from domestic production, supporting by the existing supply, project supply, and potential supply components. We could also optimize the role of LNG as projected in our Indonesia LNG balance. There will be increasing production of LNG in year 2028. In the next 10 years, Indonesia would have gas surplus up to about 1.7 billion standard cubic per day, coming several potential projects in various regions of Indonesia. The projects including Masela that will commence its production after the needs of this decade, and IDD project, which is expected to support Bang energy production. There will also be Andaman and Akum Pule soon will come up, which are expected to contribute to the gas balance in the long-term future. Ladies and gentlemen, the production from Pundang LNG in year 2026 is estimated to be about 28 cargoes. In the following year, the production will increase about double to 56 cargoes, since the completion of the long-term LNG export in 2025. All the expected LNG production are still uncommitted. The expected production from Masela is expected to be huge. In year 2028, the LNG production is estimated to be about 150 cargoes, and 2035, the production will relatively stable. Ladies and gentlemen, in year 2021, our natural gas is mostly used to meet the demand of national industry, reaching about 27.45%. The gas is also allocated for export in the form of LNG of 22.18%, for fertilizer of about 12%, for export is about 13.14%, and for electricity of about 12% as well. We also utilize gas for our domestic needs of LNG and LPG with 8.56% and 1.26% respectively. A small percentage of the rest of the consumption is for city gas and gas for transportation fuel. Around 64.3% from the production is used for domestic needs, where the total distributed gas is about 4.4% 5,700 5,734 ppd. Ladies and gentlemen, Indonesia oil and gas upstream investment potential are huge. In terms of natural gas, we have proven reserves of about 41.62 TCF. Even though the reserves are not significant compared to world reserves, but Indonesia still has more than 60% that are unexplored. To encourage more upstream investment in Indonesia, the government has conducted some breakthrough policies such as contract flexibility. The investor can choose either cost recovery PSC or prosperity scheme. Second, terms and condition improvement and breakdown. Third, incentives, both fiscal and fiscal. The fourth, online permit submissions, and the fifth, regulation adjustment for unconventional. Ladies and gentlemen, the government of Indonesia has been developing natural gas infrastructure throughout the country. As an archipelago country, developing the infrastructure has been a challenge, especially in the western and the eastern part of Indonesia, with its small and remote islands. In the western part, we have already existing pipeline, mini LNG regasification, LNG refinery, and FSRU. Now, we are under the project to connect almost every area in Sumatra and Java with our transmission pipeline. In this part, we are planning to develop FSRU and mini LNG regasification. We are also planning to carry out our conversion program of diesel to gas power plant. In 48 locations, with a total capacity of about 2.6 gigawatt, and the gas demand is estimated to be about 280 TBTUD. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, from the producer country perspective, we stress the importance of increasing investment in natural gas, both upstream and downstream, to ensure security of supply and furthermore to stabilize gas market. This can be achieved among others through policy that create better investment climate. It is also important to develop more infrastructure to enhance the utilization of natural gas. More financing and investment are needed to expand the infrastructure development. We also realize that establishing global gas markets needs collaboration from all parties, including producers, consumers, investors, and other stakeholders. I hope through this event, we will have very good and detailed discussion, and we are looking forward to gaining invaluable knowledge from all speakers and panelists. We are looking forward to cooperating in finding short-term solutions for current global crisis. Thank you very much. Director General of Oil and Gas untuk Aryaji.
Thank you, Professor Aryaji, for your remarks. It's now my honor to invite His Excellency Mohammed Hamil, Secretary General of the Gas Exporting Countries Forum, to give his keynote address.
His Excellency Arif Tasrif, Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources, Republic of Indonesia, Mr. Yudo Twinanda Riyadi, Chair of the G20 Energy Transition Working Group, Professor Tutuka Aryaji, Director General of Oil and Gas, Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources of Indonesia, Professor Hidetoshi Nishimura, President of Area, ladies and gentlemen, good morning from Doha and Selamat Siang. I am pleased and honored to address such a distinguished gathering. The world faces a multifaceted crisis and the global energy systems suffer from a succession of shocks. The coronavirus pandemic led to dramatic human losses and considerable economic damage. The world is still reeling from its adverse impacts. The post-pandemic recovery is sharply slowed down by the combined effects of the highest inflation in decades, supply chain disruptions, tightening financial conditions, and geopolitical tensions. Developing countries are the hardest hit by high food and energy prices, as well as increased borrowing costs, causing social unrest and political instability. According to the IMF, the prospects are gloomy and more uncertain, and the balance of risk is skewed towards the downside. This workshop focuses on one specific dimension of this global crisis, that of natural gas. Its origin could be traced back to 2015, when the decline in investments began. Three main factors contributed to this decline. One, very low gas prices. Two, a misleading narrative that natural gas use is not compatible with combating climate change, and the ensuing pressures to stop financing natural gas projects, despite increasing demand and the production natural decline of 30% per annum on average. Three, the imposed economic restrictions on countries well endowed with petroleum reserves and with large production capacities. This decline in investment has been exacerbated by the 2020 pandemic. Natural gas prices hit the bottom, deepening the financial difficulties of gas exporting countries and those of the industry. History has shown again and again that underinvestment can only lead to higher prices in the long run. And this was clearly visible in the second half of 2021, when demand for gas sharply increased, caused by strong post-pandemic economic recovery, and by the adverse weather conditions in various regions. The geopolitical tensions in Eastern Europe have further accelerated gas markets tightening at a time when the supply from other energy sources, such as renewables and nuclear, remains much lower than expected. Given the sheer size of Russian exports to Europe and the impossibility of fully redirecting the concerned gas volumes to other markets in the near term, the resulting supply-demand imbalance is huge, despite production increases in many regions. As the role of Europe shifted drastically from being the market of last resort for LNG deliveries to becoming the preferred destination, the adverse effects are being felt worldwide. Hub-based gas prices have reached record levels. Demand shift from gas to oil and coal is underway in many regions and industries. Various policy means, such as price caps and subsidies, are used to shield end users from the effect of high prices. Developing countries, notably in South Asia, face immense difficulties in acquiring LNG cargoes, a situation that is creating havoc on their economies and affecting people's standard of living. The risks in the short term are skewed to the downside. Unless the world economy plunges in a protracted recession, it is likely that market tightness will continue in the near future, and may even worsen in case of colder than normal weather in the northern hemisphere, requiring extremely high prices or even physical curtailments to balance the market. In the medium term, gas markets are expected to remain rather tight, despite the increase in investment during the last year and a half. Major gas developments will only come on stream after 2025. Against this backdrop, I wish to congratulate AREA for organizing today's workshop to explore short-term solutions to the global gas crisis. Many of the proposals in the concept note are sound. But when implemented, their effects might be too late to ease market tightness in the rapidly approaching winter. I look forward to the experts' discussions and the outcome. Ladies and gentlemen, the famous poet Jalaluddin Rumi wisely wrote, "When there is ruin, there is hope for a treasure." I thus believe that it is important to draw the lessons from the unfolding energy crisis. The recent developments in the energy scene have brought to the forefront of the energy policy debate the issue of energy security, with its two intertwined and mutually supportive pillars of security of demand and security of supply. These are the two sides of the same coin. The energy policy rethink now underway shall seek a balance between energy security, affordability, and sustainability. Reaching such a balance will depend on national circumstances. There is no one-size-fits-all model. At the GECF, we believe that natural gas plays a pivotal role to this end, fueling economic growth, expanding social progress, and contributing to the protection of the environment. Available, clean, flexible, and versatile, it is an enabler of the energy transition, a transition that is just, inclusive, and leaves no one behind. Natural gas helps to transition away from the use of wood and dank for cooking, thus alleviating the adverse impacts of indoor pollution and reducing deforestation. It contributes to improving air quality, notably in densely populated megacities. It is a partner of renewables, providing much-needed backup and stability to power grids. In developing countries, notably in Africa and South Asia, switching from coal to gas, along with renewables, constitutes the most realistic and cost-effective energy transition pathway. Natural gas is the cleanest of hydrocarbon fuels, and yet it could be made even cleaner by improving energy efficiency along its value chain, reducing gas flaring and methane emissions, deploying carbon capture utilization and storage technology, producing hydrogen, and lastly, promoting the circular carbon economy. The GECF member countries and their companies are active in all these areas. To fully play its role as an enabler of the energy transition, natural gas shall be affordable. And this is possible, provided that sufficient investments are made in a timely manner in all segments of the value chain. Investment is what links the present with the future. It is the key to market stability, along with contractual arrangements that not only take into account the capital-intensive nature, long lead time, and payback periods of gas investments, but also provide equitable risk sharing between producers and consumers. To this end, policy and financial support are required, as the needs are huge, to the tune of $10 trillion by 2050. Ladies and gentlemen, as the focus is understandably on finding short-term solutions to today's energy crisis, I wish nevertheless to recall the other protracted energy crisis that billions of people in the developing world are suffering from on a daily basis: the lack of access to modern cooking fuels and to electricity. The Millennium Development Goal of universal access to energy by 2030 shall remain a priority objective and shall be achieved despite the difficulties that the current global crisis may create. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish you fruitful deliberation and a positive outcome in your meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And now please allow me to welcome the President of the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia, Professor Hidetoshi Nishimura.
His Excellency Arifin Tasrif, Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources, Republic of Indonesia. Honorable Mr. Yudu Dwinanda Buria Adi, Chairman of the G20 Energy Transition Working Group. Honorable Professor Tutuka Ariaj, Director General of Oil and Gas, Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, Republic of Indonesia. His Excellency Mohamed Hamel, Secretary General of the Gas Exporting Countries Forum. All distinguished speakers, moderators, panelists, and participants, it's a great honor for me to deliver the keynote speech on this G20 parallel event on exploring short-term solutions to the global gas prices. Since the COP26 Glasgow Pact in 2021, the world has been moving towards attaining a carbon neutral society. The energy transition pillar of global cleaner energy system and just transitions under the G20 Indonesia Presidency 2022 aims to achieve a global deal to accelerate the energy transition. The G20 Indonesia Presidency has chosen, therefore, to achieve carbon neutrality targets by accelerating the process of reducing energy-related greenhouse gas emissions through various forms of decarbonization. Natural gas could contribute to reducing greenhouse gas emissions through its expanded use, not only in the initial stage of clean energy transition from 2020 to 2030 by applying existing and affordable fuels and energy technologies, but also in the longer term between 2030 and 2050, when more advanced technologies such as carbon capture, utilization, and storage CCUS will be deployed. The price of energy, especially that of gas in the global markets, has risen sharply in recent months, triggering great volatility. This has been brought about due to increased energy demands as the world recovers from the COVID-19 pandemic, combined with underinvestment in oil and gas exploration since 2015 and current geopolitical tensions. Heading into the winter season, countries in Europe are struggling to secure sufficient natural gas supply. On July 20, 2022, the European Commission issued Save Gas for a Safe Winter, a proposal to reduce natural gas demand that should take effect until the end of Northern Hemisphere's winter 2023. Gas supply in other parts of the world could be significantly impacted in the short run as developed countries also needed to secure their gas supply. This situation could potentially create a threat to global energy security. Gas-producing African countries risk to see increasing gas or LNG export deals and soaring foreign investment in their gas sector, whilst their domestic access to energy and power a key element of improving the country's economic condition, has not yet been secured. Asian countries have also started to experience serious impacts of the gas crisis. Global LNG flows are being redirected to Europe, where utilities are willing to pay more than the emerging markets. Some Asian countries have been curbing purchases due to the high gas prices, whilst perilous situation is beginning to occur in some South Asian countries. Relatively poor countries risk experiencing frequent power blackouts. Countries with high reliance on energy imports are being hit especially hard by the soaring gas prices. In this half-day workshop, we would like to discuss and find short-term solutions to deal with the current gas crisis. This is not the usual workshop, since we really need to come up with a set of concrete measures and recommendations to deal with the alarming situation. We are racing against the clock. Based on experts' views and analysis, we will have the opportunity to elaborate and sharpen a set of real workable solutions that we can propose to the world, initiated by the G20 group. Therefore, in the perspective of today's discussion, especially, Area would like to invite all of you, key stakeholders, to join forces, share good practices, experiences, analysis, and commitments to cope with the current world gas crisis as soon as possible. Finally, I would like to convey my thankfulness that Area has been given this opportunity to serve as co-organizers of this very important G20 parallel event, as well as the other two previous important energy transition working group side events on making carbon capture, utilization, and storage CCUS affordable, enabling CCUS deployment in G20 and beyond, and escalating gas roles in energy transitions, respectively on 13 April and on 11 May 2022. Please allow me also to reiterate Area's commitment to support the Energy Transition Working Group ETWG of Indonesia's G20 Presidency 2022 in organizing all its activities, in formulating concepts, action plans, and roadmaps, and in ensuring the full implementation of all its decisions. I wish you all a fruitful and enlightening discussion. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Nishimura. Ladies and gentlemen, now please allow me to invite Mr. Priadi and all respected panelists and moderators who are joining us here today in this room to come to the stage for the group photo. And I'd like to remind all of our panelists who are online to please turn on your cameras so that you'll be part of the photo as well. Are all the panelists online? I mean, they have their cameras on, or do you need me to remind them? Okay. Great. Thank you so much to all speakers, moderators, and all the participants who've waited patiently. I'm now pleased to invite Mr. Hiroshi Hashimoto, Senior Analyst, Head of Gas Group, Fossil Energies and International Cooperation Unit, the Institute of Energy Economies, Japan, to give his presentation proposed short-term solutions for the current gas crisis.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you can hear me very well. Thank you very much for Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources in Indonesia and area for this opportunity to talk about the proposed short-term solutions. Following the brief introduction of current gas market, especially LNG market situation. Focusing on the ongoing crisis. Can you pull up my slide, please? Okay, good. So the next slide, please. The chart here shows current flows of LNG in the global LNG market. I'm focusing on the flows of LNG, showing the shift that is happening this year. There is ongoing extreme high price situations later. The chart on the left-hand top shows the imports of LNG by the major LNG markets in the world, namely European Union plus Great Britain in blue, and Japan in orange, and gray in China. From 2021 to July this year. As shown in the chart, we saw significant increase in European LNG import, while Japan and China decreased LNG imports significantly in this year, and then China decreased LNG imports a lot more than Japan did. So Japan is currently the number one LNG importer in the world, while its import volumes are slightly lower than last year. But Europeans are importing much more LNG than those two markets. And the shift is occurring mostly focusing on the volumes from the United States. In short, China, Japan, and Asia reduced LNG imports in the first half of 2022. The chart on the right hand shows the increases and decreases of LNG import in the first half of the year from 2018 to 2022. The volume changes in the 2002 are shown in dark blue. So the China decreased a lot, Europeans increased a lot. Next one, please. Next slide, please. No, not this one. Previous one. Yeah, this one shows the changes in LNG export by major LNG producers in the first part of the year. And growth of LNG production has been dominated by the United States in recent years, including the first half of 2022. So the volume shift happened mostly on US LNG, and then deduction of China's LNG imports going to European market. The next one, please. This chart shows selected gas prices as well as oil prices around the world. LNG and gas prices have been the highest in the history and more expensive than crude oil since July 2021, showing unprecedented volatility to shoot up even higher from time to time. And the situation has been worse since the middle of 2022. We are now seeing European, in particular, continental European gas price premiums. Now the TTF is going up to nearly more than $500 per million per barrel oil equivalent right now, and we could see even worse situations after that. Now, next slide, please. Then I move on to proposals of 7-point solutions and some reasons and challenges. Here we see some first two items. These are measures to increase availability, supply volumes. The first one is across the board ramping up of natural gas and LNG production. Of course, producers around the world have already made efforts to maximize their outputs. Still, it is very important to let them know that consumers want more gas at this moment. As production has to be connected to the market for the incremental volumes, infrastructure and transportation should be arranged beforehand. So it is easy to say increase production, but production should be connected to the market. So each item out of 7 solutions, each has merit, but also its own challenges. Increasing production should have also challenges to be connected to the market. The second one is supporting countries with idle capacity or delayed upstream and midstream gas projects to regain their capacity to produce and export gas, especially to the most needed regions. Existing gas projects with idle capacity and projects approaching to completion should be immediately effective to quickly help the needed market. But the question is how to identify such projects. Some countries may have difficulties in developing projects because of economic restrictions imposed either on the country or other countries. Next slide, please. Number 3 and 4 include measures to improve flow of gas. First one is an emergency plan initiated by the G20 group to reroute LNG cargoes to the world's most needed regions with low purchasing power. A cargo without immediate need to be discharged at its original destination could be diverted to a second destination with more immediate need of gas. The question is how to identify such cargoes as suitable to rerouting, as well as to identify the most needed regions. Many regions may claim we are the most needed regions. Number 4, optimizing LNG cargo destination by taking advantage of specific contractual agreements, meaning flexibility incorporated in some contracts. Since some LNG cargos travel much longer distances these days, time has come to optimize cargo destination in a greater scale. Number 5 and onward may focus on government actions or coordinate actions between stakeholders. Number 5 is issuing statements that can help stabilize the short-term gas markets. Although gas producers or companies may want to maximize revenues, they already understand that excessively high prices could destroy demand and shrink future potential markets. G20 countries can show their willingness to see those prices that make both producers and consumers happy. Next one, please. Okay, number 6, initiating and intensifying discussions on formulating potential short-term measures to mitigate excessive volatility in prices. It doesn't necessarily mean regulating prices, but there may be some measures to have effect in mitigating the volatility or excessively high prices. One example is competition authorities. Those authorities may have reasons to look at practices of players in the international LNG market to protect citizens. Suggesting a possibility of actions by the authorities may have effect to modify behaviors of market participants. I can raise some examples of successful actions by competition authorities. One is European Commission's investigation into gas market behaviors in the past, as well as Japan's Fair Trade Commission's reports on destination clauses in LNG contract in 2017. Number 7, urgently establishing universally accessible real-time information platform on natural gas trade. Importance of market information has been emphasized in the last several years but it is particularly important this time. Timely information will enable governments to consider and establish appropriate policy measures in advance of critical events like gas shortages. Necessary information may be different by country depending on structures of individual gas markets, but in general, we could make efforts to establish such a universally accessible platform. Thank you very much for your patience and listening to my introduction of the 7 measures. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hashimoto. We will now move to the first of the panel sessions, Importing and Exporting Countries' Perspectives and Reactions on the Proposed Solutions, moderated by Mr. Nanang Untung, expert staff for the Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources, Republic of Indonesia.
A very good morning to everybody. It's quite interesting to have introduction, the background, the backdrop of this panel discussions to make sure that we try to make these discussions fruitful and productive. We have actually five panelists, and it is already, I believe, represent the group of exporting countries and importing countries. So it's going to be very interesting how to address these 7 solutions that has been suggested by area. I think we can deal in more detail on that. So we thought, further ado, we can start inviting the first panelist, which is Mr. Jonathan Goh. And let me try to read the short bio. Mr. Jonathan Goh is the Director of External Relations at the Energy Market Authority of Singapore, EMA, a statutory body under the Minister of Trade and Industry. He is the Singapore leaders for the senior official meeting on energy at ASEAN, APEX, and G20 meetings. Jonathan also organized the annual Singapore International Energy Week. So we thought we like first panelist to present his view on these 7 proposed solutions, and then after all of these 5 panelists already present, then we can start discussing and make a debate on how to make sure this will be a very hopefully aligned, and have a way forward of how these proposed solutions can be materialized. So, Mr. Jonathan, the time is yours. Oh, the Jonathan, please. Pak Jonathan. You can see your picture is over there. It's it's handsome, the real.
All right. Well, selamat pagi, and good morning to everyone, and thank you very much for inviting Singapore, myself, and my delegation here for this morning's discussion on gas. I think it's an important discussion, and I think earlier we've heard a lot on from all the different speakers, and also of course from Pak Yudo. So I think we have a good, broad understanding of the gas developments. So I think the question is for us now is to look at the importing countries and the exporting countries' perspective. And Singapore obviously is an importing country, but so I think my perspectives will be very much based on an importing country's perspective. But if you allow me to really start by highlighting some of the latest findings in the International Energy Agency's latest gas market report. Now we see that energy markets have been on edge and countries are facing a global energy crunch. Now first on the demand side, global gas demand growth is expected to dip a little bit in 2022. However, the IEA estimates that this decrease is not due to an acceleration in clean energy transitions, but instead a result of reduced economic activity and reduced gas to coal, or coal to gas, and oil to gas switching. As economic activity ramps up post-pandemic, including in Asia, gas demand growth is expected to rebound, specifically in Southeast Asia alone. Now, the region's energy outlook estimates that gas use in Southeast Asia could increase by 40% between 2020 and 2030 if global gas balances stabilize. Now, on the supply side, as mentioned earlier by various speakers, gas supply markets will become tight or became tight due to supply disruptions, production outages, and geopolitical tensions. Global gas production is anticipated to decline in 2022 after a slight growth of an estimated 4.1% in 2021. The IEA estimates that gas production growth to 2025 will remain muted. Now, against this backdrop, the tight gas market has created ripple effects on electricity markets, and governments around the world are taking various measures to secure sufficient fuel supplies. Well, in that light, then what is Singapore's response to this gas crisis, right? Now, the gas price volatility and reduced LNG supply availability has impacted the Asian markets. Gas importing countries like Singapore will have to take steps to secure our energy supply and safeguard energy security. With Singapore relying on imported natural gas to generate around 95% of our electricity, our domestic energy prices will not be immune from the volatility in global gas and energy markets. Higher fuel prices globally have resulted in higher domestic electricity prices, the gas resources or energy resources form a large part of the electricity prices in Singapore. It is also vital that the global volatility does not, in that light, we want to make sure that global volatility does not disrupt our electricity supply and impair the functioning of our domestic energy market. Therefore, we had taken steps to stabilize prices and safeguard energy security. We set up a standby LNG facility which power generation facilities can tap on to replace disrupted supplies. We also require generation companies to bolster their own stockpile of fuel. For a long-term strategy, we are empowering private players to build, own, and operate offshore LNG terminals, and we are also seeking to appoint more long-term LNG importers. This will enhance our value proposition and maintain a balanced portfolio of energy resources, as well as ensure competitive LNG prices in the long term. I think at this point also to very quickly share some reflections on the proposed short-term solutions that was mentioned. Now, first, natural gas is a critical element of the global energy transitions, and there is a need for continued investments in LNG infrastructure. I think most of us will agree on that. LNG has become a key alternative to traditional energy resources or energy sources as the cleanest burning fossil fuel, which can complement the intermittency of renewables and ensure electricity supply, reliability, and security. We will therefore need to continue investing in LNG capabilities and infrastructure to meet this demand growth. Second, we should continue to maintain open, transparent, and competitive gas markets. This means avoiding distortionary measures that could destroy energy markets and further exacerbate price volatility. Third point is we can turn every challenge into an opportunity. Now, during this crisis, as mentioned, we should also encourage energy conservation practices. In Singapore, companies can tap on the various energy efficiency support measures such as the National Environment Agency's Energy Efficiency Fund and Building and Construction Authority's Green Mark Initiative scheme. We also need to accelerate the deployment of renewable energy sources as much as possible and explore new energy technologies to meet longer-term energy needs. A promising solution is hydrogen, which has the potential to be produced and transported globally. Now, in conclusion, it is vital that we ensure our energy system remain fit for purpose. This means being innovative, forward-thinking, and pragmatic. Investments in LNG infrastructure are necessary, as LNG will continue to play an important part in the global energy transition. And recent events, have shown that LNG will remain a critical source of energy for the present and foreseeable future. I thought the Secretary General Mohammed made a very good point earlier on the various on his views on the market. Now, anyway, at the same time, we should cast our eyes to the future and make early investments in alternative energy technologies such as low carbon hydrogen. That's all I have, Chair. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jonathan. All right. For the second panelist, we have here Mr. Takahiro Hirai. He's online. Mr. Takahiro Hirai currently serves as a Deputy Director for International Affairs (LNG) in the Ministry of Economy, Trade Industry of Japan. Previously, he served as a manager at the Nippon Export and Investment Insurance. So, Mr. Hirai, the floor is yours. I hope he's already online. Thank you. It's loud clear. Yeah. Okay, continue.
Yeah, thank you for having me here. I am Secretary Director for Gas Division. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to Secretary and Elia for its leadership in holding the timely workshop. So today, I am going to show the Japan's view of short-term solutions and energy transition as well. Could you show my presentation slide on the screen? Yes, thank you very much. So please show second page, please. Next slide, please. Yes, this one. So as concept paper mentioned, for short-term solution, it is a good way to support countries to drive the ideal project, such as Mozambique Area 1 project, which Japan is also investing. I think it is also a effective way to invest a brownfield LNG project, because in general, the expansion of existing projects have the advantage of relatively low risk, our additional production, and lower investment scale than starting from scratch in greenfield projects. Slide, please. So regarding to the investment, here is the investing story. We need investment upstream in LNG field, while understanding and being careful for decarbonization, carbon neutral goals. This graph shows that current amount of upstream investment is less than what is required under the IEA's net zero scenario. As well as energy transitions, energy security, and securing energy access should not be forgotten. There is a growing need for more energy to be supplied in a low-carbon way, especially in Asia. While achieving carbon neutrality is crucial, the role of LNG and natural gas in the transition period should not be underestimated. To avoid misunderstanding, I am a strong supporter for carbon neutral, but prices continue to rise due to shortage in gas supply. I am seriously concerned that public support for decarbonization should be lost, which should make it more difficult to promote decarbonization. To be frankly speaking, some discussion which aims to end all public support, even for LNG, is very problematic, because apparently there is no sufficient energy in the world to meet our needs. Some Asian countries cannot afford to buy LNG, because many developed countries buy energy more and more from spot energy market. So, in the G20 communique, the government needs to measure the necessity of investment in LNG and natural gas. We need to support private sector as a hesitant to investment in LNG fields because of fearing stranded assets or concerning to carbon neutral goals. So public finance is very important. Please go to the next slide. So G7 communique is a good example. G7, we mentioned that necessity of investment in LNG. I hope that G20 will follow in a good way. And I have very high expectations from the leadership of Indonesian government and opinions from excellent participants here today. Please go to the next slide. So for the short-term solution, flexibility is important more than ever, such as destination fee. Japan decided to divert energy to EU in February. It was a demonstration of Japan's willingness to expand in solidarity with like-minded countries. So please go to the next slide. So I would like to tell you about energy transition as well. So Dr. Reddy has very important remarks recently. He mentioned that there is a lot of understanding of how much the world is being supported by oil and natural gas. In the past energy transition so far, there have actually been energy additions. He also warned that if we do not proceed energy transition in an ordinary fashion, then there will be energy crisis. So again, in the energy crunch situation, G20 countries should consider what we need, what we should send a message all over the world, and also private sector. So please go to the next slide. So at the beginning of this year, an interesting statement was issued by BlackRock CEO Larry Fink to the company with an over $10 trillion of assets. He mentioned that it should be recognized that there are diverse pathways to energy transition, and the pace and methods will vary from country to country. It is shown that natural gas plays an important role in this process. And also clearly mentioned that a simple divestment should not be taken. What is the meaning of these suggestions? This is completely aligned with the fact that Japanese government has been calling for LNG to be an important resource for both environmental measures and economic growth. And we should be aware of the danger of funding energy A and going to B before energy B can fully replace energy A. There should be no confusion about the time frame for each. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Takahari Hirai. So we come to the third finalist, Dr. Lamia Abu Shaba, who believes is already online. Dr. Lamia is the General Manager of Gas Market Activities in Operations and Network Department at the Egyptian Natural Gas Holding Company, EGAS. Among her current duties is leading the department responsible for managing and handling all the works and documentations with regard to the new regulatory frameworks adopted for the Egyptian gas markets. Dr. Lamia, the floor is yours.
Thank you for having me today and for your managing the crisis. Allow me just to give you some insights about the Egyptian natural gas market. Actually, the Egyptian natural gas market is a very mature market in terms of the full value chain. From the perspective of gas producing, you have a major gas production increase in the area thanks to the new gas discovered in the Mediterranean. During the fiscal year of 2021, 2022, we managed to produce about 6.7 billion cubic per day average natural gas. In terms of infrastructure, inside Egypt is a well-developed gas network for transnational distribution of natural gas from the producer to the distribution and to the final consumer. This is a sign of the wide variety of different gas facilities, LPG, emitters, and different refining and conditioning of gas. In terms of demand, Catholic market, market where the sector represents the biggest contributor, about 60% of the natural gas that is indigenously produced inside Egypt is currently being consumed by the power sector, followed by around 20 or 24% of natural gas being used in industry and other sectors, where there are currently ambitious plans to expand the connectivity of households and urban and CFD that the natural gas has inside it. From the perspective of working and exporting, since actually Egypt have been facing fluctuating curve of a fluctuating trend in import and export. Back in 2005, where Egypt managed to export this natural gas into the natural gas discoveries, we started exporting our natural gas via the two LNG facilities in the Mediterranean. The capacity is 4.8 to 7.2 million tons per annum. And then LNG exporting has been continuing till 2014, where we started to do some different aspects. We started to export natural gas, and then started to import liquefied natural gas via FSRU floating storage and regasification state. At this point, Egypt realized that security supply and sustainability is very important. This wouldn't be possible without having the direct investment in the upstream production and without capitalizing on the current existing infrastructure and very skilled and experienced personnel working in the field of natural gas. And then Egypt decided to capitalize and to start an ongoing dialogue with the Aram and the East Med regions, where there is a great potential of natural gas to capitalize on the need for population of Egypt, the infrastructure, the discovery, and by attracting all the neighbors, the natural gas, aiming at to maximize and to ensure the sustainability and security of. So, we would like to speak about how Egypt planning to adopt the current gas prices in terms of perspective by exporting countries. As I mentioned, we are now essential, although the major gas need right now, we are now positioning on the surface gas where we can export natural gas. Back on October 2021, Egypt realized the dramatic surge in prices and the rapid peak of LNG. Egypt started to gradually adopt the first proposed short-term solutions as indicated by Mr. Hashimoto, which is wrapping up the LNG production in a new production process of natural gas. This has been done by adopting some measures in different dimensions. The first dimension, which is attracting gas to utilizing and capitalizing the existing LNG. The second dimension, which is accelerating the gas production. And the third dimension, aiming at reducing the demand of natural gas inside the domestic market in order to avail more natural gas for export. This has been done through different methods. One of them is by depending the flexibility of the system, as I mentioned, around 50% is being natural gas domestically consuming the gas. So what we've done is basically food chain between natural gas and liquid fuel through main power stations. This helped us to go from period from October 2021 to August 2022 to avail an amount of natural gas that helped us to export about 35 cargoes just during this. This wasn't the only solutions, but also we adopted other solutions as depending on power stations, the power stations high efficiency, aiming at that were export. Also, putting in restrictions related to power plants related to energy and electricity consumption, state-dependent conservation, besides the implementation of a number of people connecting projects in order to increase the network flexibility and include some good information that the energy plants can be accessing the national grid and receiving more natural gas. At the end, we needed tested effective applied solution to result in the maximum benefit to energy experts to vast nations, meaning Europe and Asia regions, where about 84 energy corridors, which is equivalent to 354 natural gas, has been exported to extraction plants between 21 and 20. We believe that the ongoing dialogue among the countries, the region, countries is very and capitalizing of the existing infrastructure in and ensure by attracting investment is a very important key element and the role of international organizations very crucial and very important and sensitive. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lamia. Again, congratulations for the discovery of huge gas reserve, ZOR, in 2060. That's a game changer. And I believe that also become an inspiration of other countries to believe that there will be more investment in the upstream will pay off if we really exercise that program. Okay, we have the fourth panelist, Mr. Martin Square. Master, could you please come up? Mr. Martin Square currently heads of the Energy Security and International Branch within Australia Department of Industry, Science, Energy and Resources, which supports the deliveries of the government domestic energy security agenda through its assessment of current and future risks and threat to Australia's energy security. Pak Martin, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And it's really a great privilege to be able to have the opportunity here to provide you some reflections, I guess, from Australia's perspective on the current global gas crisis and the particular challenges that high energy prices are impacting both in the developed world, particularly in Europe, as a result of Russia's unlawful invasion of Ukraine, but also how those prices have impacted both within domestic markets and in countries here in Asia. It's also a great privilege to be here in Bali. I travelled from my home yesterday in Canberra. I've had a lot of trouble convincing my work colleagues who are coming to the end of a very cold Canberra winter that I was coming to Bali for work. No one seemed to believe me, so I'll have to send them some photos showing that I'm hard at work. We've had a lot of very good presentations and speakers this morning who have really sort of examined quite carefully and provided a very good analysis on why we are currently where we are in the global energy market, particularly in gas, and there isn't anything those speakers have said that I would disagree with. His Excellency, the Secretary-General, really summed it up that it's a series of events that have led us to the situation where we're in. Underinvestment, particularly from about 2015 onwards, the very, very long lead time that is required to bring on stream large LNG investments, the challenges that we've had globally in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic. And what I wanted to cover, and also wanted to thank Mr. Hashimoto for his observations, and I'll turn to those shortly around how we might respond to some of those proposals. Anything we can do to stabilise the global gas market is certainly welcome. I mean, Australia is in a unique position. We are currently the world's second largest LNG exporter. All of those significant projects have been underpinned by long-term contractual or contracts with our major energy trading partners. I was in Japan and Korea in the last week and a half for bilateral energy and minerals discussions with two of our, Japan certainly being our largest and longest LNG trading partner. And the events of the last 12 months have really brought home the importance of energy security and the importance both of having not necessarily diversity of supply, but reliability of supply as well. And Australia has never missed an LNG cargo since we started exporting back in 1989. We certainly want to work. We want to work on proposals that will help secure additional supplies, and that's both domestic and international as well. So Australia understands very much the importance of its role in providing energy security for our major energy trading partners. But gas is a very important fuel for Australia, particularly as we are starting our journey towards net zero by 2050. Australia is particularly blessed or privileged to have a lot of very good solar and wind assets in Australia, and renewable energy generation is the cheapest form of electricity in Australia. But what we see is that gas plays a particularly important role as a firming technology when that solar PV, rooftop PV. We have one in 4 households in Australia has rooftop PV. But when that rooftop PV isn't producing, you need gas as a firming technology. Now that will be alongside batteries and pumped hydro and so on, as helping us to deal with the intermittency of renewable generation. And even though there's significant progress that we have already made in Australia on our transition to net zero, for example, on a typical day during summer in Australia, we'll see anywhere upwards of 40–45% of electricity generation from wind and solar. There is still a significant amount of investment that is needed for Australia to achieve net zero by 2050. And to give a sense of scale of those numbers, we need to essentially put double the amount of electricity through our electricity grid. We need to add an additional 30 times amount of storage onto our national electricity grid. We need to increase utility scale solar and utility scale wind by 9 times. And that's a significant investment and a significant challenge. And LNG will continue to play an important role, or gas will continue to play an important role for Australia as a firming fuel well into 2050 and beyond. If we look at the particular suggestions from Mr. Hashimoto, so in terms of securing that additional investment, We've recently made another offshore acreage release as well. We encourage investment from companies looking to explore for gas in Australia, and many of those investments have led to fruition. So, for example, the Japanese INPEX project was originally a gas discovery that has ultimately led to an LNG project. In terms of Mr. Hashimoto's second proposal in terms of with idle capacity or delayed gas projects, so with the current high prices, any LNG producer is capable of increasing production, is certainly responding to those market signals. But we'd certainly welcome and encourage more investment in Australia's LNG industry. In terms of rerouting cargoes, this is a pretty challenging concept because we've got a couple of things at play. So, for example, in Australia there isn't much LNG that is available to the spot market. That's largely because those our LNG projects are underpinned by long-term contracts with our major energy trading partners, Japan, China, Korea, Taiwan. But certainly what we are also seeing as a result of EU sanctions on Russian oil and gas is essentially supply chains are reconfiguring themselves. So there will that will sort itself out over time, certainly as countries in Europe are sourcing alternative supplies to Russian gas. There is also the case of there is limited spare capacity available in the market at the moment. So redirecting cargoes could potentially have negative effects in the sense that they are at the expense of somebody else's or some other country's energy security. So those sort of proposals have to be looked at carefully if it's not bringing on additional supply onto the market. Issuing statements to stabilise the short-term gas market. Australia, along with other IEA members, Japan, Korea, etc., have contributed to two IEA collective actions so far this year. There isn't a collective action mechanism for gas, but it is certainly something that has been proposed, and I think what has the events of the last 12 months, 18 months have shown us is that the concept of energy security is certainly not just about oil or indeed liquid fuels, but it is also about gas and also clean energy technologies as well, and knowing your supply chains very well. In terms of price volatility, the Australian energy market operator had to intervene in our domestic energy market early in the year in response to very high electricity prices. That was a combination of some coal production that had been flooded due to rain. We are also seeing our coal-fired power fleet generation, as it's nearing the end of its economic life, it's becoming less reliable. The owners of those facilities are reluctant to invest money in those facilities as they reach the end of their economic life, and that consequently pushed prices in the national electricity market up to around $400 a gigawatt hour before the energy market operator intervened. Finally, in terms of any measures that improve transparency and accuracy of global trade data would certainly be welcome. That builds public and government confidence in the market and also assists countries with making optimal trading decisions. Australia is very keen to work with our global partners to consider mechanisms that can keep gas supply flowing throughout the crisis, particularly strengthening energy supply chains to reduce the likelihood and impact of future shocks, as well as developing clean energy technologies to diversify supply, key priorities for the government and international cooperation going forward. Where Australia is in a competitive position to underpin our international partners' energy security, and we look forward continuing to do that as well. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Martin. Very good presentations from Australia. And last but not least, we have here Dr. Philip Sbilla. Dr. Philip is currently the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Nigerian LNG Limited and the Vice President of Boni Gas Transport. Prior to this, he was the CEO of the Atlantic LNG Company of Trinidad and Tobago. Dr. Philip Sbilla, the time is yours.
Nigeria is considered the ninth largest proven gas reserves in the world, about 209.5 TCF. And this is proven, has a potential to go to 600 TCF, which would place it as the fourth. This, of course, this is not yet, the balance is not yet proven. In essence, Nigeria has more proven reserves than any of Australia, Malaysia, or Indonesia, roughly half twice Indonesia. Incidentally, each of these countries I've mentioned currently exports more than Nigeria in terms of volume and as a proportion of their reserves. Nigeria LNG, which is a company, has a capacity to produce 22 million tons of LNG per year. This is produced through 6 trains that are currently in operation, but we also have a 7th train that is under construction at the moment and due to come on stream within a couple of years. Nigeria was the 6th largest exporter of gas in 2021 based on EIA data. And what I'd like to do to share my perspective is to align it with the 7 solutions that have been proposed. So I'll make comments in that order. I think the first solution was around post-war ramping up natural gas and LNG production. And there, we let see this, it's in 3 branches and categories. The first, what I would describe as the short term, focuses on basic capacity utilization. So where we have existing capacity, how do we maximize that? And primarily this is done through increasing the feed gas supply. What you find is that Nigeria LNG today is only able to operate at somewhere about 70% of its capacity. And I know that there are a number of other LNG plants around the world that are also short of feed gas. I know that for sure in Trinidad and Tobago and a number of other places. supply feed gas into those plants in order to maximize the utilization of existing capacity. And that's the short-term way in which we can bring energy into the market around the world, especially where it is not supplied by pipeline. There is a medium-term strategy, and from a Nigeria perspective, that's focused on the completion of the Train 7 project. So as I said, Nigeria currently has 22 billion tons per annum of capacity. With the completion of the Train 7 project, the capacity will be increased by over 35% to bring it to 30 million tons per annum. This, of course, will then be available on the global markets. While this adds G capacity at the same time, because our gas is quite rich, it also adds LPG, so butane, propane production as well, which we consume in the local market. Beyond such medium-term projects, and there are many around the world, in the US, Qatar, of course, we all know is hard at work. There's a number of projects that have just taken FID recently as well, which will all potentially come on stream in the medium term. The longer term will require investment. This will be new investment and new expansion opportunity. And this has to cut across upstream, midstream, as well. We often leave out the shipping and the importance of shipping capacity. Nigeria LNG has 23 dedicated energy vessels to enable to meet the market demand. As the production grows, obviously, shipping capacity will be required for this as well. So in that long term, we're looking at, if I speak from an African perspective, further expansion, potentially beyond Train 7. We're looking at projects like Mozambique, various projects, we're looking at projects in Tanzania, potentially Angola, as well as other activities that could potentially take this in the for Nigeria. Ultimately, I think that regional collaboration and agreements are going to be quite useful in helping to fast track some of these developments. I'll move on to how do we support trees with idle capacity. Just spoke about idle capacity being probably the biggest way to address the short-term shortage that we have. Talked about our Train 7 and that's coming on stream as well. But there are a couple of other that Nigeria is doing. And so domestically, there is under construction now pipeline that's taking gas from the southern part of the country, the Niger Delta, where it's produced, to the part of the country with lines going off that integrate parts of the country. This is known as the Jakuta-Kano or ETWG pipeline. This has been constructed by the National Petroleum Corporation or NNPC Limited. So are the three projects. However, there are other projects that are currently in discussion. Many of us would have heard about the Trans-Sahara gas pipeline, which is meant to take gas from the same Niger Delta through to the northern part of Nigeria, through Niger and Algeria, and from there into existing pipelines into Europe. And similarly, there is a proposed Nigeria-Morocco gas pipeline, which would take the gas in the Niger Delta. This would be an extension of an existing pipeline, the West African gas pipeline that goes from Nigeria, Togo, and ends up in Ghana today, running and steam off into these countries. The Morocco gas pipeline would be a continuation of that, and it would take the gas all the way around the West African coast to Morocco, with extensions into Spain. This, both the Trans-Sahara and the Moroccan pipeline will be able to deliver about 30 BCM each. The Trans-Sahara gas pipeline is up, I guess we put it at $13 billion, while the Moroccan pipeline
Okay.
So there is scope.
Dr. Phillips, sorry, you still have 6 solutions to be addressed, and the time is a little bit limited. So could you please continue? But this is very interesting. But could you please more concise to make sure we have the time management?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Those were the areas that I particularly wanted to focus on. I think lots of the others have been touched on around diversions and rerouting where possible, and again, driven by operational realities. Those could be done. The points around taking advantage of contractual agreements, I think those are being done already by many of the players in the market. I did want to make comments on Solution 5 around issue statements. And the only point I really wanted to add to what was said is that we cannot make empty statements. I think at the end of the day, people's reality is how much they're paying the gas meter or the fuel pump. And so whatever statements are being made need to be backed up by reality. And I think some of the other points have already been addressed, so I will skip this. But at the end of the day, I do believe that a lot can still be done in order to stabilize the gas market. And one critical aspect is that in trying to stabilize the gas market, we need to do it in a way that balances the need to manage energy security, managing energy transition, but also managing energy poverty and the sustainability of energy accessibility and affordability around the world as well. So that's mostly. Thank you very much. I'm back to you.
Thanks, Dr. Phillips. Thank you very much. Okay, let's now come to the discussions and more detailed debate on these 7 solutions. We understand that solution number 1 and 2 is more related to the productions, LNG productions countries, and we have here actually the 2, more than 2. This is we have Dr. Lamia from Egypt, and also we have Dr. Phillips that represents the production. You have already conveyed the situations of the from the perspective of producing country, but could you maybe from other part of the table, what is actually, for example, in so let me try to deal with this, Dr. Phillips. You mentioned that there will be some requirement to maximize the productions. For example, there is a collaboration alignments needed, and also is there any other support for financials to, because I understand to do this, number 1, and 2, there will be requirements of financings to support this. Do you have any issues that need to be raised up to address this one? Dr. Phillips.
Absolutely. Indeed, the financing is a key challenge, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. I speak specifically on Nigeria. There is a lot of challenge in raising financing, partly because of the security situation that exists within the Niger Delta. If you look at some of the big projects I'm talking about, we're talking about investments of over $10 billion for each of these projects. The Trans-Saharan gas pipeline will be going through the Sahara and Accra, where already there are significant security challenges. Today we also face security challenges within the Niger Delta, where oil pipelines are also being vandalized and attacked. challenges, but they are all surmountable. And I think it's really about partners coming together, governments coming together, and private sector investment, come together, actually work out some of the collaborative ways of overcoming these challenges. Well, we have demonstrated that in the past, the various expansions that we achieved with LNG, and therefore it is possible to do as well. We've seen in Mozambique, for example, how the investment was there, but the security situation interrupted some of the projects. It seems now that some of them are able to resume construction in various stages. So it's global, and I think the effect around the world will be done.
Okay. How about from Egypt, Dr. Lamia, and then later on Martin from Australia? Is there any issues about financing or other factors that can support this solution 1 and 2? Maybe Dr. Lamia, could you elaborate more on that?
Yes, thank you. Yes, this is very important. And based on our journey, we face some time where we have some shortage of natural gas. Basically, our LNG facilities for some time we faced a lot of shortage, a lot of outage. We have a lot of capacity not having feed gas due to short situation. Then, very important to attract gases from all around the region, and this needs some sort of line with the yellow and ocean. And from here we start the idea and the initiative to establish a forum in the ETWG as the stream gas firm, thinking at capitalizing of it. The idea was to make sure that as long as we are having this capacity ready and needed to liquefy natural gas and send it all over the world, this cannot be set on. We need to do really invest in the world for indigenous gas and attract it, and that this cannot be not having the containers here. And that's why we really think that this is very important, the platform where countries can further discussion, can use their joint development for production, utilizing the assets for making sure sometimes we develop for some countries, just the case for Egypt. Our development plans have discovered for some time wasn't enough to utilize the capacity for LNG. However, other countries will have the opportunity to send their gases to utilize the That's exactly what we're doing right now. We managed to align together and a lot of discussions to align together the production, development, upstream. We managed to attract to have a lot of the producers, consumers, traders. And this is very important as mentioned in the second constitution and the role of the institution is a very important institution.
Okay. All right. We have also here, Pak Martin is actually also part of producing country. Is there any issues for the financing? Of course, later on we'll ask from Matty, who also normally provide the financing for doing, it has been addressed before that investment, which basically financing is the issues that also become a major cause of this crisis. But could you please elaborate on that?
So certainly, I mean, if you look at it from a producer perspective, in particular, it's the extent to which the current high prices are sustained in terms of how is the market reading those signals? Are those pricing signals sufficiently high enough and provide enough confidence for the producers to invest the significant capital investment that's required to underpin, an LNG project that's going to run for 30 or 40 years, and the scale of investment is massive. If I think of the sort of the Gorgon project in Australia that finished once it had finished construction at around US $53 billion. It's a massive amount of money, and the producers need sufficient confidence in that those prices are going to be sustained over the long term to generate an economic return for their shareholders. Conversely, though, on the customer side, I mean, those customers who have long-term supply contracts are largely protected to an extent from higher prices because of their contractual arrangements, which operate as a buffer. So we would certainly encourage our customers to sign long-term supply contracts, both to ensure surety of supply in the longer term, and also get access to better pricing. I mean, if you take a longer term perspective, gas is going to continue to be in demand well through to 2050 and beyond as a transition fuel, and customers can secure their own energy security through long-term contracts.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to maybe Mr. Takahiro Hirai. So you are also normally promoting from the financings and also probably representing Japan for importing countries. For the financing, do you see the message that natural gas and LNG become sustainable energy resources in the future can become another push for the financings to go back and then increase the appetite for these financings? That's probably question number one. But question number two is actually from the perspective of LNG buyers, the solution number 3 and 4 for rerouting LNG to the most needed country, and the solutions number 4 for optimizing destination using contract flexibility. Is that workable, and what is the potential challenges that to be resolved on that? Mr. Hirai?
Okay, thank you very much. That is a good question. Regarding to financing, the question is that LNG or natural gas will be sustainable fuel in the future, because once we invest in LNG upstream sector, we need 15 years or 20 years to get some money back. So we need to have a long-term contract, 20 years or 15 years, to get the financing. So this is a problematic issue, because if we away with the agreement, 20 years contract from now on, that contract will be lasting 2052 or 2055. So then all companies worry about their carbon neutral goal in 2050. So regarding the business side, it is necessary to change the business model so that they can get the return about 10 years or 15 years. Also, hopefully with CCS. And I heard some of projects have the business model to switch natural gas or energy or product hydrogen or ammonia in the 20 years investing with some, roughly 10 years in energy, but next 10 years you can have that option to switch energy or hydrogen or ammonia. I think that is example, I think. And the second one, the question is regarding to yes, this is the most important thing, I think, for the short-term solution. Transparency and flexibility. Flexible electric cable can divert all over the world and intercept each other. So Japan always and speak to nations and say that distribution free is the key to have energy security. That makes sense?
Okay. Yeah, of course. But I think we remember last time when Japan was have a tsunami in year 2011, and because it is located in one country, then that crisis is able to be supported by almost everybody, all the countries. But this is spread all over the world, so probably we need to have some united effort where that organizations can asking each individual producers and exporters to give their excess capacity to be able to support to the other most needed country. And this is actually, I don't know whether this G20 will be a trigger for that, and can be realized, and then later on we have like accumulated excess, and then we can divert it to the most needed. I would like to ask Jonathan Goh from Singapore of this solutions number 3 and 4 for this diversion, and also comment on this joint effort to find the excess on each individual exporters or importers facilities, and then try to allocate to the most needed countries. Do you have any comment on that?
Thank you. Maybe I'd share what we do at in Singapore for the generation companies. So during the spike of gas prices, and some of our generation companies are not able to contract enough gas, so we implemented a measure such that if any generation companies in Singapore have excess gas, right, the government of Singapore and other gencos have the first right of refusal, right? So they cannot sell, they cannot on-sell the excess gas capacities that they have to the international markets. So that I think is to be able to stabilize the gas, not say gas imports, but the gas that other generation companies that need, and they are unable to procure because of the sudden spikes in the prices, or there is just a very tightening in terms of the supply. We can do that because we have, as the authority, as a regulator, we do have the powers to enact such emergency measures, and it's very unlike what we do in the past, because we believe in a free market, and but the circumstances have called for such measures to be taken by the regulator, and it's not something that we often do. Can this be applied to the rest of the world? The quick answer is I'm not quite sure, because you know the direction must come from somewhere, and as we believe in Singapore, any policy we must have the ability to enact and implement the policy. Otherwise, there's no point having a policy or regulation. So, but I think the crunch is quite real in many countries and all that. And how do we keep that balance intact? It's a challenge. We see that winter is coming. We see that a lot of gas importing companies are stockpiling gas or LNG. So, and I suppose there are good reasons to do so, looking at the increase and impending increase in prices, and they also need to stabilize the internal domestic markets. So how do we then ensure that the rest of the world are not affected by that price increase because of the massive LNG that they actually procure? So that's one I think one area of discussion that it needs to continue to continue. In terms of upstream investments, I think the IEA has already provided a lot of analysis. If you look back, and if I look back what Dr. Bureau has been saying over, like, if you look at the 2016 to 2019 discussions, actually the IEA has been pointing out that there is going to be some lack of upstream investments. Yeah, but it's, I suppose, whether these signals are well taken by not just the gas companies, but also the governments. You know, because, so if you have invested in ExxonMobil shares when they were going down, today you make a lot of money. But at that point in time, nobody thought that, or people have some fears because of so many different elements in the markets today, right, at that time. So I think there are signals, but how can we better coordinate some of this response? And I think the Indonesian chair this year has come up with some very good documents, including the Bali Compact, and how these documents can be put in better practice and signal the markets. I think that's very important. In Singapore, we also have the Singapore Energy Outlook that we publish every year. So to give some stability and clarity to the markets of where the electricity demand and supply will come from or will go, so that they then be able to make better, I think companies are able to make better investment decisions. So I think that kind of information flow, that kind of signals must continue to come from the G20 countries. And I think that in itself will be able to stabilize the markets to some degree. You know, but of course, if you do have geopolitical tensions, if you do have events, you know, that happen just out of the blue, like what the war in Europe, then again it's quite difficult. I mean, we already see the prices increasing even before the war, right? That just exacerbates the situation. So I think we're entering into this period where there's just a lot of factors coming together, and hopefully, you know, I think it has stabilized a little bit, but because of winter, we do see how we can pull through winter this year. Right. Thank you. I hope it sounds used to the discussion. Thank you.
Right, Mr. Go ahead. I think that also address the solution number 6 and 7, the requirement on that. But I would like, before closing, to address solution number 5, where actually issuing statement that can help stabilize short-term market, and this has been initiated by European unions that categorize energy gas is will become sustainable energies. Is there? I would like to have a short comment on that general statements on this, because that probably very important for giving a signal message for the future of the gas. We can start from you first, maybe.
May I just add a quick point on regional cooperation, right? So if you look at Southeast Asia, there is an A-scope mechanism, what we call the ASEAN Council of Petroleum Companies and all that. And they have already come up with a lot of studies on the LNG markets, short-term supplies, and regulatory reforms, price reforms, those things I think also important, and I think they do send a signal that countries are cooperating, countries are trying to look at some of this cooperation mechanism or enhance them further, and I think those things would continue to be important, especially in Southeast Asia, where I mentioned earlier that gas demand will continue to rise. Thank you.
Right. Could you please comment on this statement that maybe also, especially from Australia, if you are very keen for renewable, but is there any statement for the gas, like the European Union?
Yeah, so in the case of Australia, I think sort of domestically we've recognised the importance of gas as a firming fuel, particularly for renewable generation. But it is, I think, around sort of having the confidence to say, and you know, we support the IEA analysis that the gas is very much an important fuel that underpins individual countries' energy security, but it also underpins energy transition as well. So it can do two things at the same time. It can reduce emissions, but it can also help countries on the path to achieving net zero. And the confidence, I think, in terms of long-term energy policies of countries also can support that. So, for example, Japan's not far away from updating its energy policies and plans. Mr. Go indicated in relation to Singapore, they do an annual plan. The more information that is out there from individual countries about future expected gas demand does help provide the sort of the information to the market and builds that confidence.
Okay, I'd like a comment from Dr. Phillips from Nigeria on this general statement on this gas as a sustainable energy resources. Dr. Phillips?
I think that the statements that you made is extremely important, but it's hard to contrast to some of the comments we have often discussed. As if gas was going to follow coal out of the door, and these are ETWG and considerations, some of the financing is going to dry up for gas. And following the EU statement, I think that is changing. That's positive because the reality has always been that gas is going to be needed for quite some time to come. It's unfortunate that the Ukraine war and the EU around actually making a statement. I do think that statements matter. Statements like that will be quite important for the G20 and other organizations to make because it then helps to communicate what needs to be done and the direction that we need to go in. And I think one of the points that was heard there in the speeches at the beginning about the fact that the general public does not fully understand how much oil and gas contributes to our lives. And that's why I think there's an advocacy that is still not sufficiently done around the people on the street understanding how much oil and gas actually plays a role in their lives. If you just look around you, you'll find most of the things around you made of some form of plastic or some part of oil and gas. And therefore, those statements do matter. Like I said in my earlier comments, statements are important as long as we follow through the action. So I'm really looking forward to COP27 in Egypt to see how that plays out in trying to balance between energy security, energy transition, and, like I said, energy poverty.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Lamia from Egypt, and later on, last but not least, from Mehdi for the joint statements.
Actually, I think the statement is very important because what is happening in the market right now has shown us that the natural gas should utilize while moving on the change of the transition of energy toward net zero and to reducing emissions. It's very important and the movement is very important. It's very important to see hydrogen. It's very important for all countries to aiming and looking toward zero emissions and working in this one. But bearing in mind that this cannot be done by just one click, this journey, and should be one person considering the role and the crucial role of natural gas. We cannot just lift the investments in the natural gas as we are more focusing on renewables because it's not a click, it's a process, and the process should be continuously aiming at protecting the environment, considering the new technologies, you mentioned hydrogen strategy that's still in Africa, we still very important for, and this message has been clear and clearly stated by all bodies.
Okay, right, thank you. Last but not least, Mr. Takahiro Hirai from METI on the joint statements. Hopefully, METI will also support this. Thank you.
I totally agree with all participants' information. And how about studying the G20 communique? Many of us exactly what's going on in the G20 communique. So if we are mentioning that LNG and natural gas is crucial role for energy transition, and we need to invest in LNG and natural gas sector. This forward will bring very, very positive impact on our energy security and private sector, especially financing sector. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. With that, probably will end this panel discussions. Sorry for 10-15 minutes late, but I believe it is quite productive and useful to give insight, and hopefully this G20 conference can produce, hopefully, like a joint statements later on that has been already issued by European Union. We can probably do the same thing. But again, thank you very much for the panelists and all the participants and viewers. With that, we'll end this panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Untung, and all the panelists for such an interesting discussion. We will now turn to panel session 2, Market Effects of Possible Short-Term Solutions, which will be moderated by Professor Jun Arima, IRIA Senior Policy Fellow for Energy and Environment.
So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And then I have listened to the panel discussion in the session 1 with a great interest. And also to follow up the discussion, let's move on to panel 2, the market effects of possible short-term solutions. And we have 4 distinguished speakers from international organizations and also international company. And first speaker is Mr. Christoph van Aert. Actually, he's my old friend when I was working for the IEA. He's currently the Director of Energy Dialogue at the International Energy Forum in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, to advance producer-consumer collaboration through IEF ministerial and stakeholder meetings with partner organizations such as G20 and International Gas Union. He coordinates the IEF trilateral work programs with the IEA and OPEC, and collaboration on energy security, market stability, and just and orderly transitions with industry stakeholders, national agencies, and research centers. So without further ado, Christoph, floor is yours.
Mr. Chairman, it is of course a pleasure to join this special workshop on exploring short-term solutions to the global gas crisis, hosted by IRIA in collaboration with the G20 presidency of Indonesia. As a parallel event, we're very grateful to support and contribute to the G20 deliberations, and look forward to be joining you in person soon. Of course, the consensus view is that you can't buy energy security off the rack. like it is fast fashion or confection clothing. Indeed, the IAF was established in the early 90s after producers and consumers took turns losing their shirts in the 70s and 80s as they tried to beat each other on the energy markets they share and will continue to do so in the future. Now, on the issue paper on exploring short-term solutions to the global gas crisis, past lessons learned show that there are few other than a long-term commitment to producer-consumer partnership and well-functioning and transparent energy markets. Enhancing global energy dialogue within the G20 and on the IEF platform, as G20 leaders called for at their last meeting in Rome, is of vital importance, therefore. This is the moment when policymakers must listen to real-world price signals rather than what models showcase and restrain the reflex for direct market interventions in times of crisis. Strengthening international partnerships for more investment and interconnections with a clear commitment towards the circular carbon economy and carbon capture, use and storage technologies will allow us to meet multiple axes of affordability and net zero targets and restore balance in the fastest and best way possible for all stakeholders. So let markets correct supply-demand imbalance and resolve trade-offs. Assist businesses to do what they know best, namely matching risks and rewards in difficult and changing environments. Don't meddle in a multi-layered crisis. Unintended consequences will make that situation worse. There is no silver bullet or singular solution. These are the messages current price signals send. We can't eat our gas security cake and have it too. If governments get in the way of sound energy market functioning and financial rigor, soaring energy prices compounded by spiraling inflation will only prolong what has become a global energy and cost of living crisis. That will only erode support for climate goals as well as terms in office. The worst is likely still ahead for energy markets. This winter could see demand curtailments, a re-emergence of heat issues, and mounting social unrest as savings are lost to soaring energy bills and cost of living expenses. Governments must therefore respond to the price signals energy markets give and adjust policies accordingly, and not vice versa, adjust prices to meet policy, while protecting the most vulnerable. Elevated volatility and price breaks reflect structural problems and distortions. Let's not add to them. The EU and other OECD economies must reinvent their stance on oil and gas investment, also with regards to their policies in international financial institutions. So governments should give markets the room of maneuver to adjust, respect contracts, and minimize interventions that add risk and uncertainty in an already highly volatile environment. That is, of course, if private sector investors are to take the risk and reap the rewards that fix the problem, instead of impoverishing households through tax and money supply funded government investments. The best cure against high prices are high prices, not arbitrary caps and more government controls, commandeering LNG shipments, or otherwise hampering markets to function. Enhanced gas market data transparency and energy market monitoring, indeed through Jody and the establishment of a gas market focus group, is useful to optimize gas flows without reinstating destination clauses and avoid hoarding of gas volumes. For instance, when purchases are made without firm demand or sufficient offtake capacity in place. So to conclude, energy security is not a short-term concern, and it cannot be bought at the expense of others. Energy security requires investment in long-term partnerships and in reliable and diversified gas supplies. Today's energy crisis highlights the need for stable, predictable, and well-functioning markets during the energy transition. Increased investment and market stability are essential to preventing future gas shortages and ensuring no country is left behind in terms of energy access and affordability. Energy dialogue in respect of sound energy sector performance has only gained in importance after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The IEF looks forward to joining the G20 Transitions Working Group and G20 Transitions Ministerial Meeting to enhance dialogue and overcome crises. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Christoph, for your very much insightful presentation. So now let's move on to next speaker, Dr. Aidal Shakilov. He's the head of Gas Market Analysis Department at the Gas Export Countries Forum, GCF Secretariat. And he has worked at the Secretariat since 2017, at the beginning as gas transportation and storage analyst, and later as the head of the Gas Market Analysis Department. So, Dr. Shakilov, without further ado, floor is yours. Dr. Shakilov, your voice is muted. Still your voice is muted.
Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to be a panelist. I will comment on specific 7 solutions proposed by Dr. Hashimoto, one by all. Economists do not represent the position of 19 GCF member countries, so it's my own expert's view. The first solution is part of natural gas and energy production. This is really a straightforward solution. However, this is more of a medium-term to long-term solution. The existing LNG liquefaction capacity is already utilized at maximum operational level. First, although some countries may be able to increase their gas production, LNG export capacity is a constraint. Second, in some other countries where there is idle or underutilized LNG capacity, feed gas availability and political instability hinder the increase in LNG production. In the meantime, a new LNG export facility usually takes around 5 years to be built after FID is taken. Just 30 million tons per annum of new export decommissioned this year and next year, which will provide little relief to the tight LNG market in the short term, considering that LNG demand will continue rising. In the meantime, over 140 million tons per annum of new capacity is expected to come online between 2024 and 2026, which may provide relief in the medium term. The second solution is support countries with idle capacities or delayed gas projects. So, the global utilization rate of LNG export facilities today is just about 80%. The underutilized capacity is due to lower feed gas availability in several LNG exporting countries and idle capacity in such countries as Libya and Yemen due to political challenges. As such, increasing capacity utilization in the short term is quite challenging. To tackle the feed gas issues in these countries, investment in the upstream sector in the exporting countries is needed. In the meantime, we have witnessed a steady decline in investment in the gas industry over the last years, which contributed to the market tightness today. Developed G20 countries would support the financing of gas projects for export in developing countries. Developing countries could also collaborate with IOCs on the development of gas projects in their countries. Some ECF member countries, including Iran, Venezuela, and Russia, with vast proven gas reserves, have been impacted by economic and technological restrictions. Such restrictions could contribute to the stability in the gas markets. Sanctions disrupt energy trade and add financial burden on consumers in gas importing countries. The third proposal is emergency plan to route LNG cargoes. So, my opinion is that it will be a just and equitable solution. Gas traders with flexible LNG cargoes would route some of their cargoes from long-term contracts to the spot market, which could contribute to a reduction in LNG spot prices. However, to achieve this, there must be an agreement between both buyer and seller to utilize the downward quantity tolerance in the LNG contracts. This is quite challenging and may require government intervention, both from G20 countries and the governments of gas importing countries with no purchasing power. The fourth solution is optimized LNG cargo destination. So we just think that LNG cargo swaps can be arranged between producers located in different geographical regions to target the shortest possible shipping distance between a liquefaction project and the receiving terminal. This way, the number of sailing days are minimized, and with that, there will be lower expenses related to charter fees and fuel costs. Short voyage times would lead to less product being lost due to cargo boil-off. Besides, there should be targeted improvements in the infrastructure associated with the LNG capacity, boosting of the size, propulsion systems and containment technologies of the vessels, as well as the necessary adjustments to regasification terminals. The fifth solution is issue statements. This is really important. It is true both for the short term and long term. The meeting of the G20 would be an opportunity to issue positive statements which support the unhindered flow of energy to markets, free access to markets, and the provision of financial resources to energy projects. Statements may be made by the gas-producing countries, including those adopted at the level of the GCF, may contribute to stability in the natural gas markets. In this context, GCF issue statements in the summit declarations and ministerial meetings. Stakeholders should avoid making negative statements that contribute to instability in the gas markets, such as calling for stopping investment in natural gas. Besides, stakeholders should avoid making statements which create uncertainty regarding the future of natural gas demand. The solution number 6 is initiate discussions formulating potential short-term measures. Clearly, the credo of moving the stability to market forces has been proven to be unsatisfactory. The concept of fair price may be achievable with some level of interventions. Long-term contracts should be encouraged. They will have to ensure investment in the industry, and the gas will have shortages. Solution number 7 is information problem. We definitely support such initiative. The GCF is a partner of Geordie Gas and supports the principle of data transparency. So the G20 countries would create a platform to share real-time information on gas trade, similar to what is provided by consulting firms and data providers. Countries who are not part of the G20 could also be invited to participate in the data sharing in such platforms. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shakilov, for your very, very concrete responses to the 7 recommendations. So now let's move on to the next speaker, Mr. Edito Barcelona. He's a senior research fellow at the head of Energy Statistics and Training Office of the Asia Pacific Energy Research Center, APAC. Mr. Barcelona started his career in the energy sector when he joined the Energy Policy and Planning Bureau of the Philippine Department of Energy, DOE, in 1993 as a research specialist and monitoring of energy sector and preparing of Philippine energy plan. So, Mr. Barcelona, floor is yours. Yes, I can hear you.
My fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen all over the world, morning, good afternoon, and good evening. May I ask the organizer to share my slides? It is my honor to be invited to speak in this workshop, and in my talk today, I will address proposed solution number 7 only, that is urgently establishing a universally accessible real-time information platform on natural gas trading. Next slide, please. There is currently a universally accessible information platform on monthly natural gas data. However, it is not a real-time information platform, and it is updated only once per month. You can see in this slide. The latest data in the database is 1-month-old data released after about 1.5 months after the end of the month. This is the Jody Gas World database. This database was an offshoot of the Joint Oil Data Initiative, or the old Jody, that started in 2002, that aimed to moderate and oil price volatility, thereby increasing investor confidence and contributing to greater stability in the energy markets worldwide. With the success of the old Jody, which covered on the oil data, energy ministers called to expand Jody to other forms of energy. Then gas was doing in 2009. Next slide, please. Data collection in Jody gas is limited to production, trade, stocks, and total consumption of natural gas and LNG, and the deliveries to the electricity and heat generation sector. Trade data by source and destination are not required. Next slide, please. Currently, data submitted to Jody gas comprise almost 70% of global production and 75% of global consumption. A total of 91 countries and economies have participated in Jody gas, and this is less than 50% of all the countries and economies in the world. This coverage could be low if we want a highly transparent gas market. Next slide, please. Aside from the low coverage of Jody gas, there are other difficulties in gas data collection, which are several countries and economies submit late, not after the end of the month, not after the end of the following month, but later. Not all can submit consumption data, and not all can submit stocks data, and Jody gas does not require trade data by source and destination. As I've said earlier, 1-month-old data are already 1.5 months old when made available to Jody World database. Next slide, please. However, APEC, IEA, and Eurostat collect data by source and destination, as you can see in this slide. Next slide, please. And however, and the APEC
The imports by source and exports by destination are publicly available in the ETWG website, as you can see in this slide. But it is limited only to 21 APEC economies, and all other countries and governments in the world are lumped together as the rest of the world. The EU gas database, and next slide please, is also publicly available, and unlike in APEC, they take out EU members with all the individual countries and economies in the world are available. So you can see how an EU member is reliant on other countries and economies. Next slide, please. Now, can Jody Gas be improved to provide real-time information on natural gas trade? According to experts, real-time data may be possible in matured pipeline gas markets only. What about in remote production fields and gas separation plants, in liquefaction regasification plants, and LNG terminals? Can we provide real-time information? What about in major consumers like power plants? Next slide, please. This could be possible through digitalization. Currently, data are collected by companies from their plants or branches before submitting the process totals to the government statistical offices or energy ministries. What if there is automatic flow of digital data from individual plants or company branches to the government statistics office? Next slide, please. That is, data is transmitted directly in real time. So after data is transmitted to the government, then the government can also transfer the data automatically to Jody Gas for the global rural database. Next slide, please. And what would this entail? What would digitalization entail? This would need cooperation of all subsectors in the gas market, such as producers, traders, receiving terminals, gas distribution operators, governments, and international organizations. And then there should be standard data format, including definitions and codes and transmission methods. If I would like to share about Jody, initially it took thousands of emails for Jody partners to agree on a very simple 42 data point format. So that made Jody successful, having the standard format. And then digital technologies and infrastructure are needed to facilitate such data flows. These are already available, but in many countries and economies, developing countries and economies, this infrastructure might not be as good as those in the G20 economies. Then algorithms that will process the raw data from the field to the until the Jody Gas database are needed for this to become successful. Now, fortunately, according to OECD, G20 has a digital agenda to help countries harness the benefits of digital transformation. It is very good. And for the gas market, a work stream focusing on the digitalization of all the sub-sectors of the natural gas industry would be needed to urgently establish the desired, universally accessible, real-time information on natural gas trade. That's all from me. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barcelona, for your very much detailed presentation about the current status of the gas data. So now, the final speaker is Mr. Chong Z. Shin. He's the Director of Gas, Power and Climate Solution at S&P Global. based in Singapore. And he leads an emerging market team covering natural gas and LNG in South Asia and Southeast Asia. His focus is on understanding supply, demand, and pricing outlooks for commodity markets and the impact of government policies. So without further ado, Mr. Shen, floor is yours.
Hello everyone. Thank you, Professor Jun Arima, for that kind introduction. I would also like to thank Arya for inviting me for this particular workshop to share our views about the global gas and LNG markets. My name is Sid. I am a director at DSNG Global, and we look at research and consulting across the entire value chain on energy. So this includes both upstream gas and power, even to downstream oil and petrochemicals. Now this particular session, where we were looking at really short-term solutions to solve these global gas crises that we are facing, is a really timely event to have this sort of dialogue among stakeholders, among the government, among the business industry, and among the associations as well. Now, one of the things that really struck me today was when we saw Christoph really talking about the interventions that we're not supposed to look at. We're supposed to look at gas market liberalization, looking at price signals in order to solve the world's problems. I think that's something that we really like to echo when we look at the market today, looking at the high LNG prices, which is about $50 to $60 per MMBTU. There's a really caused a really significant change in the trade flow of LNG markets. Already we're seeing Europe from January to August this year importing 30 million tons more LNG compared to 2021, and much of this diversion is coming from LNG that's coming from the US. But in addition to that, we're also seeing additional LNG that's coming from other parts of the world as well, including Middle East and Africa, and that's all in response to the price signals that's being sent from the market. So when we are looking at what really can be done in the short term, I think unfortunately there isn't very much to be done. When we look at markets around the world, they have really been fairly optimized. Supply projects are operating at maximum capacity, and where there is sufficient additional volumes, they would be diverted to the European market today. Now, the unfortunate issue that we are facing is that when we are coming up to winter, it does look that some markets will continue to face really high import prices, and they will not be able to look for the cargoes that they're looking for. In a particular example that we heard the chairman talk about, South Asia, like Bangladesh and Pakistan, was really facing some issues importing additional spot cargoes. Now, this is the same that we're seeing in even places in Southeast Asia as well, where Thailand is really facing much higher prices. That import of LNG has prices have basically tripled, and it's very difficult for them to source cargo sleeping coming up over the next few months. Now, the problem that we are facing, and governments are also struggling, is with such markets, do we just leave it to the free market in order to solve the problem, or do we step in and intervene? I think that is something that is very difficult to answer. Every country needs to look at it in its own perspective, and some situations may require government intervention in order to solve the immediate problem at hand. What we do see that there will be some downstream ramifications that affect other markets as well because of this distortion. But it's something that's inevitable, that will be required to solve the short-term measures. We have seen from ARIA that there is basically 7 solutions that has been proposed. I will be commenting on 2 of them. Firstly, is really looking at the real-time information that is currently being proposed today by the Jolly Gas database as well. We as research and consultants on an independent basis, we tend to look at market statistics and data from across the world. And real-time data from more developed countries definitely provides a clearer and more better picture in terms of the allocation of resources. Now, some of the things that's really difficult today from different countries is the different units that they're seeing. For example, the United meters, and in Australia it tends to be gigajoules. Having a common database, just having a common set of measurements that is consistent across all markets is really one simple way of getting databases consistent and something that's able for all participants to really understand. Now, having this kind of real-time information flow that we are currently getting from ship tracking, from customs reports, would really go a long way if all countries were to look at publishing these data on a real-time basis. But in order to get there, I think a lot more training and organization will be required, and that may require best practices to be shared from organizations such as ARIA, from APEC, or even from consulting and research companies as well. This is one way in order to get data on a consistent basis that will allow the cross-pollination of different sectors as well. So I think that's something that's quite easy to do. More transparency does not really distort the market and will lead to better outcomes. But longer term, we have heard from all the speakers today as well as in the first panel, that at the end of the day, in order to really solve the problems and issues that we're facing today, it's really about financing, it's really about investments. And one thing that is really clear to me over the last few years is really about the narrative that we as an organization, as an industry, is putting out to the public, putting out to the government, putting out to lenders as well. When I look at several weeks when I attended in 2020, 2021, the outlook was really negative simply because there wasn't too much emphasis on investing in oil and gas projects, and that resulted in a lot of lenders, a lot of sovereign wealth funds actually looking to reduce their exposure to this market. And that has really exacerbated the underinvestment that we have seen since 2015. Now looking ahead, I think the narrative has changed. Right now, we're really looking at just energy, we're looking at affordability, we're looking at more investments in order to allow the energy transition to continue. We need to recognize and we need to emphasize to the community that natural gas is really a solution that I constantly see in both emerging markets as well as developed markets today that goes alongside renewables in order to reach a net zero goal by 2050. It is outcomes that is consistent, and it's something I think we need to really hammer home that message to the public as well as to the people. Thank you very much. I do look forward to the discussion with all the other panelists today about some of the other solutions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shen. So now let's move on to the discussion, though the time is limited. And then we have heard very concrete responses, in particular from GCF, about 7 recommendations. So we have pleasure to have Hashimoto-san still here. So maybe at this point in time, I'd like to listen to Mr. Hashimoto's responses to the comments provided by in the previous panel and also in this panel. And he, if you'd like to say something about, say, responding to the comments, then I'd very much welcome that. Hashimoto-san, do you have any comments?
Thank you very much, Professor Iwa, for letting me speak. I'm particularly impressed that many panelists put the emphasis on investment. Although investment is rather longer time issue, and the 7-point solution did not specifically mention investment in the main body of those 7 points. But I agree that investment is the most important within the industry. In that sense, that point number 1, it is a statement to deal with natural gas in a positive manner will be very important. And in connection with this, long-term contract to support investment is also taken care of. It should still have a very important role, even in the well-functioned energy and gas market. So I'd like to have particularly item number 5, a positive statement on natural gas. Otherwise, general public could blame natural gas for this crisis instead of shortage of natural gas, which should be
Thank you very much, Mr. Hashimoto. And in your recommendations, recommendation 3, rerouting the LNG cargo to most needed region, and there was a moral support from GCF and other speakers, but at the same time, they pointed out practical difficulties for reaching out agreement among all the stakeholders. So how do you respond to their comments?
Okay, thank you for that point too. Of course, there are some places where LNG tankers are waiting for discharge for several days. In such cases, that LNG cargo can be diverted to another place or something. Those are intention behind. We understand that maximum efforts have been already made on this point, but still there are some to optimize the operation of energy transportation by trying to reduce shipping distances by swapping and cargo between Pacific and Atlantic regions. Such a kind of measure still can be taken to maximize the energy volumes to different markets. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Hashimoto. Only one another question, because even though you could divert LNG cargo to particularly low-income countries which do not have purchasing power, the availability of LNG cargo is one thing, but at the same time, the price needs to be affordable. If it is too expensive, they cannot afford to pay. So in that case, there needs to be some, say, incentive or compensation mechanisms for, say, encouraging such a diversion of the supply to the low-income and poor countries impacted most seriously. So, am I correct?
Yeah, I think compensation should be a different issue to be discussed, and I do not have any silver bullet answer to this question. Probably experts can discuss further on this matter. Thank you.
I see. Thank you very much. And now, I'd like to turn to Christoph and also Mr. Shakilov. Both of you have, emphasized the importance of natural gas investment and the clear messages coming from international community, in particular G20. And by the way, most recent international messages about the fossil fuel investment and also natural gas investment is from G7 Elmau Summit. And I read out their statement. We have ended new direct government support for unabated international thermal coal power generation by the end of 2021. In addition, recognizing the importance of national security and geostrategic interests, we commit to end new direct public support for the international unabated fossil fuel energy sector by the end of 2022, except in limited circumstances clearly defined by each country consistent with 1.5 degree warming limit and the goal of the Paris Agreement. In this context, and with a view to accelerating the phase-out of our dependency on Russian energy, we stress the important role for increased deliveries of LNG can play and acknowledge that investment in this sector is necessary in response to the current crisis. In these exceptional circumstances, publicly supported investment in the gas sector can be appropriate as a temporary response, subject to clearly defined national circumstances and if implemented in a manner consistent with our climate objectives and without creating lock-in effects, for example, by ensuring that projects are integrated into national strategies for the development of low-carbon and renewable hydrogen. So this is the related paragraph about the investment in natural gas coming from G7. So I'd like to ask your opinion, Christoph and then Dr. Shakilov, about whether this sort of statement on exceptional justification of LNG investment is sufficiently strong to say ignite more investment in the natural gas sectors. I very much welcome your view. Christoph first.
Thank you very much for this question. I think much more needs to be done. Gas prices will get higher if we don't listen to them. Though, of course, the G7 statement is to be welcomed. I think the operational world here is unabated in terms of their decision to withdraw government funding of coal and other fossil fuels. And indeed, as I mentioned in my speech, clearly the market shows that we are continuing to rely on gas resources. A reduction or an end to reliance on Russian gas imports in the EU and other OECD countries means that we will have to invest more in gas resources elsewhere, for instance, the East Mediterranean or Africa, the Sub-Saharan pipeline. And that will require much more government support. That is much more straightforward. Now, in order to do so in a way that we can still meet our net zero targets, we should broaden solution space and complement these statements with much more government support on carbon capture, utilization, and storage to mitigate the effects of that additional investment. So I think the G7 statement is of course, to be welcomed, but I am hopeful that the G20 will come forward with much more stronger language that is appropriate to the signals we are getting from the market and also accommodates our long-term goals and aspirations.
Thank you very much, Christoph. Then how about you, Dr. Shakilov? What is your view?
First of all, thank you for the question. I would like to stress again that the gas industry has been subject to sustained underinvestment since the year 2014. For instance, in the period from 2015 to 2020, average annual investment in the gas industry declined by 20% compared to the same six-year period, previous period, which was mainly driven by a drop in TTF prices. In spot prices, for instance, TTF prices declined by 35% over the same period. So natural gas will continue to play a critical role in global energy security, and in this context, now is the time to make sufficient investments to reduce the impact of any unexpected market shocks in the future. And in this regard, we would like to again to highlight the important role of signing of long-term contracts, which is crucial to reinforce stability of gas supply in an uncertain environment. Regarding this specific statement of G7, of course we support it, we welcome it. The only issue is that, okay, we believe that take long-term positions, and the global community should take long-term positions. We shouldn't, change our position every year. Last year, as you remember, one international organization called for stopping investment in fossil fuel industry. Today, because of these changes in the market environment, we just have changed our stance on the fossil fuel industry, and now we call for investment because of this uncertain environment and instability. So it shouldn't about the future gas demand, about the future gas supply, not at the level of G7, but at the level of other international organizations, first of all, at the level of G20. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And positive statement about investment in gas is very much, unanimous support in this panel, I think, as well as in the previous panel. And one, how can I say, headache for us is now we are encouraging new investment in the gas sector, but at the same time, it's a very much frank question, but we have a very ambitious, say, global 45% reduction goal, which is stipulated in Glasgow Climate Pact. And environmental groups argue that because of that 45% reduction goal globally, any new fossil fuel investment cannot be justified. That is their argument. And as Mr. Shakirov pointed out, last year in COP26, though it is not, say, a unanimous statement, but the statement by some key countries, including G6, excluding Japan, they said there should be no further new investment, no further new public support to fossil fuel sectors without any exceptions. So I think, so at the end of the day, how to reconcile the new investment, and new investment needs to be recoverable in the next 20, 25 years. So how can we reconcile that new investment and very ambitious 45% reduction goals? I myself do not have a clear answer, but if you have any wisdom, I very much appreciate. Christoph and Dr. Shakirov, and also Mr. Shen, if you have any good answer to this question.
For this question. I think indeed government policies must take account of the changing market realities and the events that we are witnessing here today, and will continue to witness over the winter and beyond. Clearly, the price signals are at unprecedented high levels, and that means that we must invest in upstream development. We cannot just buy it, as I mentioned in my presentation. So there must be some recalibration of these statements, which is normal, and indeed I do think, you mentioned this is a statement by the G6, we need much more inclusive dialogue, and this is indeed why the IEF, we have 71 member countries, the G20 with its leading economies, our collaboration is so very, very important to have that inclusive discussion, including with the industry that was not present at COP26 where these statements were made. To get the full picture, to get a fair assessment of how to manage this shared market on which we all depend. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Shakirov?
I believe that all stakeholders should find a compromise regarding the fair price and the market. There is a concept of fair gas prices, refers to a price range that can be acceptable by both gas producers and consumers. Over the past 2 years, the global gas market has been significantly impacted by unexpected market shocks, which have taken spot prices from historical lows in 2020, $2 per BTU, to record highs in 2022, with the clear price per BTU. This being short price, extreme prices have also been underscored by volatility as well as other structural changes in the market. while the current market situation of supply shortages has been largely driven by, but also, as everyone mentioned, is a result of several years of underinvestment. We believe that the fair gas price can aim at stabilizing investment at a sustainable level and thus prevent future extreme price reactions to market shocks. And at the same time, fair gas price can eliminate some volatility linked to the inherent regional price formations. We also believe that all stakeholders, including gas exporting countries and the importing countries, should find a compromise in terms of the finding balance between the environmental agenda and issues of social and economic development. We see that today, because of high gas prices, the gas demand in some regions is disrupted, which forces many countries to switch from gas to oil and coal, which of course undermines the climate agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Shin, do you have any comment about how to say simultaneously pursue the ambitious climate goals and new investment in the gas?
Yes, thank you for that question. I think when we are looking at the future goal, net zero by 2050 for most countries is a very ambitious aim. And with that, there has been a lot of new policies that have been put out and a lot of aims from the government in order to reach that. Now, my fear and my worry there is that when countries put out statements that say they will have no thermal generation in 20 years, in 25 years, or some even in 15 years, it makes it very difficult for players to invest in oil and gas assets. And in the reasons that there is that fear, there is a worry that whatever infrastructure they build wouldn't be used, simply because the government said that we are not going to be using any of this thermal generation in 15 to 20 years. And that might not actually be feasible. I mean, even though that is a government plan, when you look at how economies develop, it is not that quick for economies to switch in time. And if that was the case, we perhaps could see underinvestment continuing, and that could result in much higher prices that would make it very difficult for energy to be affordable. So on the one hand, while I do think that it's important that we move towards a low carbon pathway, I think there are other ways of going about it. That could be on focusing on new technologies, getting countries together to agree and come up with a plan in order to, for example, progress on hydrogen development or carbon capture and storage, because this requires joint efforts among nations in order to achieve something together that is not commercial today. And that will take time. And once we can see these technologies being commercially developed, only then can we look towards progressing towards a net zero goal. I think that's something that we could probably pursue together in a more measured way as we look at the energy transition.
Thank you, Dr. Shin. And I think your statement is very, very, how can I say, constructive, because, the pursuing new low carbon technologies does not, how can I say, is not mutually exclusive with maintaining the energy security with the current systems. So I think quite often the international debate first set a timeline for stopping all the current energy systems. And as pointed out by Daniel Yergin, referred to in the presentation by Mr. Hirai of Japan, the energy system cannot be changed overnight. So the artificial, how can I say, time horizon, phasing out the thermal power system by 2000X or something, might result in underinvestment and in the end prolong the energy crisis and the prolonged predicament of the countries with particular low-income countries. So now, let me also briefly touch upon the data transparency. And Mr. Barcelona clearly explained the current status of Jody. And Mr. Barcelona, the current gas crisis, do you think that the Jody gas initiative participating countries will be more, how can I say, responsive to the data transparency and also expansion of the data quality and also timeliness? What do you think? Is there the stronger room for improvement for Jody Gas initiative under this current, critical situation?
Thank you very much for your question. Based on the experience that we have since this turmoil, we didn't really see any improvement in the participation in terms of submission of more complete data and more timely data. Actually, there were changes such that some data were not reported. Maybe they become confidential because of the current situation. So we really hope that G20 members would improve the data submission of their home country to this gas or Jody initiative.
I see. Thank you. And Christopher, I think IEF has been the home of the many Jody-related exercises. And do you think that IEF could strengthen the debate on the data transparency and sharing the real-time data among producing and consuming countries? Is there any sign of such an initiative emerging? Renewed attention is emerging in IEF fora?
Thank you for the question. I'm very grateful for Mr. Edito Barcelona on his very good representation of where we stand with the Joint Organizations Data Initiative, and indeed being candid about the shortcomings that, of course, we at the IEF are well aware of. And I would just like to underline that the Joint Organization Data Initiative involves 8 international organizations and is an ongoing effort. We have indeed strengthened our concerted efforts on data transparency and ensuring better and faster data transparency during the G20 of Saudi Arabia when we were confronted with the COVID crisis. That has given additional impetus, but it still is very hard work. For instance, it was mentioned in our panel that what would be great is if all organizations would apply the same units. That, of course, is true, but it is very difficult to obtain that reality in practice. What we are doing is we are working more with alternative data metrics, and indeed we are working towards further digitalization of the platform, and certainly we are taking gas markets and in particular added transparency on LNG markets very seriously. So you can expect more from us in that area soon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Unfortunately, time has come to sum up this session. And together with the first session, my take back is first, there seems to be a unanimous agreement about the need of increasing production and also more fundamentally investment. On the other hand, since the existing LNG facilities are utilized with full capacity, a new LNG investment will need 5 years or more from final investment decision to production. This may not be a short-term solution for this year or next year, but a midterm solution in the next 5 years and more. And many panelists pointed out that we need a policy and a business environment enabling new natural gas investment. In this regard, messages assuring the necessity of new gas investment is crucial. Negating all fossil fuel investment, including natural gas, for the sake of climate mitigation will simply prolong the current energy crisis and erode sound economic growth, which is indispensable for long-term mitigation endeavors. And some cautious views were expressed about the intervention into the price mechanism and for cooling down price hikes. And while competition authorities could play a role in domestic market, but the cross-country collaboration among competition authorities could be more challenging, since it would be extremely difficult to share a common view among stakeholders with different interests. It is crucial to help low-income countries failing to procure LNG cargoes, and there was ethically laudable to reroute LNG cargoes, but that could entail many technical difficulties because first it needs some sort of financial incentives or for compensation. Without such a financial compensation, it would be difficult to reroute to secure secure participation of necessary stakeholders. There is strong support for data transparency. At the same time, it remains to be seen how far private companies are willing to disclose various information. And Jodi Gas Data Initiative offer a very good basis for such endeavors, though there are still many things to be done. But we very much expect IEF and other international fora take the lead for strengthening gas data transparency. Short-term solutions discussed today are not silver bullet, and actually that will take, not just several months, but take several years for make this happen. And some of them we also have practical challenges, but we must admit that there is no magic wand for alleviating the current crisis at once. Nevertheless, given the gas crisis could stay longer and then give negative impact on global energy security and a global endeavor for climate mitigation, and G20 with strong influence on both gas demand and gas supply should seriously consider all the available means for ameliorating the situation in collaboration with relevant international organizations such as IEA, IEF, or GCF. And though we discussed today focusing on gas sector alone, but other policies are also very much necessary for addressing the gas crisis, including substitution from gas to other fuel, and also energy conservation as a first fuel. And for example, quite recently, Prime Minister Kishida of Japan has clearly mentioned that the accelerating restarting of nuclear in Japan, and that in itself will reduce the potential demand for LNG in Japan and liberate the additional LNG supply to the international market. So this sort of fuel substitution and also energy efficiency should equally pursued for addressing global gas crisis. So that is my personal summary, but I thank all the panelists for participating in this panel. Your insights were very much useful, and we will report back to the G20 chair, Indonesia. Thank you very much. So let's conclude this session.
Thank you, Professor Rima and Mr. Hashimoto and all of the panelists for sharing your collective wisdom today and frank insights. It's now my pleasure to invite the COO of IRIA to deliver the closing remarks. Mr. Koji Hachiyama.
Thank you very much, instruction. And His Excellency Arifin Tarif, Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources, Republic of Indonesia, Honorable Mr. Yudo Dwiananda Priyadi, Chairman of the G20 Energy Transition Working Group, Honorable Professor Tutuk Araji, Director General of Oil and Gas Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, Republic of Indonesia, His Excellency Mohammad Hamel, Secretary General of the Gas Exploring Countries Forum, all distinguished speakers, moderators, panelists, and participants. Greeting to you all. Good afternoon from Nusa Dua, Bali. I'm Koji Hachiyama, Chief Operating Officer of the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia, EDIA. It's a great honor for me to deliver several closing remarks on the G20 parallel event on exploring short-term solutions to the global gas crisis. Today we have had the opportunity to listen to very insightful and important presentations and discussions on the world's most burning issue, natural gas crisis. We have understood how crucial the role of natural gas is in the energy transition. At the ongoing decade, it is existing and latest carbon-emitting affordable fossil fuels. It's an indispensable type of fuel that's still contributing to improving access to electricity, to clean energy for billions of people in the developing and emerging economies. To eradicate poverty and economic inequality. In the more developed economies, natural gas plays an undeniable key role in ensuring heating, cooking, and many industrial activities. Natural gas has also potential to be used as flexible base load that allow penetration of variable renewable electricity. Nevertheless, now we are witnessing an unprecedented increase in the gas prices accompanied by a great volatility, which is not only threatening for energy security in the Western world, but also the developing and emerging regions. As the distinguished speakers and panelists in the G20 parallel event have mentioned, the current gas crisis was not only caused by the geopolitical crisis, but also by the underinvestment of upstream, midstream, and downstream infrastructure of natural gas. I'd like to echo what Professor Nishimura, the president of EDIA, has mentioned earlier, that we are racing against the clock to find the implemented short-term solution that shall end this gas crisis. Today, we have had a fruitful discussion on a list of short-term solutions for ameliorating gas crisis. Let me enumerate them here again. First, across the board, ramping up the natural gas and LNG production. Nevertheless, we must realize that existing LNG facilities are utilized with full capacity, and new LNG investment will need 5 years from the final investment decision to production. Second, supporting countries with ideal capacities or delayed upstream and midstream gas projects to region their capacity to produce and export gas, especially to the most needed regions. Regional cooperation might be among the key factors to help certain countries to get rid of their potential capacity constraints, which might be due to the various issues such as financial problem and the domestic security instability. Third, an emergency plan initiated by the G20 group to reroute LNG cargoes to the world's most needed regions with low purchasing powers. It is crucial to help low-income countries failing to procure LNG cargoes. Rerouting LNG cargoes to most needed regions with low purchasing power will help. On the other hand, given gas trade is private-driven. Compensation mechanism of financial incentives would be necessary for either gas companies or importing countries. Fourth, optimizing LNG cargo destinations by taking advantage of specific contractual agreements. Together with the rerouting of the LNG cargo from the oversupplied regions, increasing the number of available LNG cargoes is a crucial effort in the next term. Exporting countries must be one who takes the initiative to optimize the operation of their LNG vessels and terminal ports. Fifth, issuing statements that can help stabilize the short-term gas market. This kind of message assuring the necessity of new gas investment is indeed crucial, as we needed a policy and business environment ensuring countries on demand and therefore enabling new natural gas investment. Negating all fossil fuel investment, including natural gas, for the sake of the climate mitigation, will prolong current energy crisis and erode sound economic growth, which is indispensable for long-term mitigation endeavors. Six, initiating and intensifying discussion on formulating potential short-term measures to mitigate existing volatility in prices. Competition authorities could play a role in domestic markets in the perspective. Cross-country collaboration among competition authorities could be more challenges, since it will be extremely difficult to share a common view among stakeholders with different interests. Most importantly, we need to avoid making interventions that might create more market uncertainty and respond correctly and cooperatively to price market signals. Seventh, urgently establishing an ambitious, accessible, real-time information platform on natural gas trade. Private companies' willingness to disclose various information is a key factor on establishing this problem. Joint Gas Data Initiative offers a good basis for such endeavors. All distinguished speakers, moderators, panelists, and participants, we have heard during this discussion that all of us, we are willing to end this crisis. We realize how energy security is an important condition to preserve that shall allow all countries to continue with its economic recovery from the latest pandemic and to continue with energy transition plan to progress towards net zero emission by the mid of the century. We need to stick to the reality that investment of upstream natural gas infrastructure is needed, and this should not be considered as a step back movement in the perspective of our ambitious climate objectives. If we continue investing on clean energy technologies in more cooperative and inclusive way internationally, no country can be left behind. Discussion about the point could serve as variable inputs for elaborating implementable policy measures to be deployed very soon to cope with gas crisis. Short-term solutions discussed today are not silver bullets. Some of them will also have practical challenges. We must admit that there is no magic wand for alleviating the current crisis at once. Nevertheless, given gas crisis could stay longer and given negative impact on global energy security and decarbonization efforts, G20, with strong influence on both gas supply and demand, should consider all available means for ameliorating the situation in collaboration with relevant international organizations such as IEA, IEF, and GECF. Willingness of all concerned stakeholders is an imperative to reach the end of the gas crisis. Area, with its network and stakeholders, is ready to make more contribution in solving gas crisis, in ensuring energy security, and in accelerating the energy transition process. Thank you again for your kind participation, valuable inputs, and enlightening thoughts in this discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hachiyama, for your closing remarks, which highlighted all of the important points from today's discussions. As we have come to the end of the event, we would like to convey our sincere gratitude to all the speakers, moderators, and participants who have been sharing their valuable expertise with us today, and to all the guests who are tuning in today, both online and offline. We now invite those of you who are here to join us for lunch on the terrace. The food is there. You can bring it back inside. And with that, this event is officially closed.